The old courthouse is a historic centerpiece of the iconic St. Louis landscape, and now it's undergoing a major renovation for only the second time since the building was completed in 1862.
It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, you could take this iteration of this project all the way back to 2010 and 2009, but it's changed so much over those years, and it's become really a more extensive and a better project.
Construction is underway for the 2-year project and is the last major part of other recent downtown renovations around the Arch and other historic sites. Most of the renovations will be updating the HVAC system and making the building more accessible to visitors.
These window air conditioner units just don't do it when you're trying to cover a building this scope.
But there will also be brand new exhibits about the history of the building and the pivotal cases that took place there, including Dred Scott and the hundreds of other suits for freedom.
What I love about the planning for these new exhibits is rather than look at it through the actual court cases as they progressed from here in St. Louis to the United States Supreme Court, it's really looking at it through their eyes.
The old courthouse will remain closed until the completion of the project in 2025. That was earlier this year, and joining me today to give us an update on the Old Courthouse project is Ryan McClure with the Gateway Arch Park Foundation and Jeremy Sweat with the National Park Service. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So I think we took that tour, I want to say it was maybe one of the last tours before the construction company took it over. That was January of 2023. Update us on the progress.
Yeah, things are going really, really well. So as you mentioned, we kicked it off in January of 23. Demolition's completed, and a lot of the vision of the courthouse, even though we're only about halfway through or not quite halfway through construction, we're starting to see a lot of those major elements coming into view. So things like the accessibility elevator and a lot of the improvements are starting to happen. So it's going really, really well.
And as we saw in the Gateway South project, there are many other projects to revitalize our downtown. Tell us about the significance in why these projects are needed.
Yeah, there's so much momentum in downtown St. Louis right now, and thinking back to the City Arch River project and how that really transformed the front door to our region. The old courthouse is an extension of that. It's using private funds that were raised through the City Arch River campaign, and it is an incredibly important building to invest in and make it more accessible, lift up the stories that have always been told there, tell new stories, and it is part of this resurgence and renaissance in downtown that's happening. I mean, the Gateway South project is incredibly exciting. It's something that we want to see happen and be successful, and it's part of other projects that are happening. The continued renovations and additions to Ballpark Village, everything that's happening in downtown West. There are just a lot of really smart, passionate, dedicated people working to make downtown the best that it can be.
And you both are technically with different organizations, but work very closely together. And, it seems like everyone a part of these major projects is collaborating and working together. Can you tell us a little bit about the partnerships?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we could not do all that we do in the National Park Service without the support of our partners. So having a philanthropic partner like the Gateway Arch Park Foundation is really key to helping us go above and beyond what we'd be able to do as a federal agency. So, I mean, there's a long list. City Arch River is still the largest public-private partnership in Park Service history. So every time you visit the Arch, you see the amazing work that happened in that project. We're here talking about the old courthouse, but there's every day and every week we're talking about new ideas and new opportunities that we can do together.
And it is. I mean, this partnership is incredibly, for it to be successful, takes a lot of work together. And there's so much trust that's been built through the City Arch River project and now where we are today. So with the National Park Service, Gateway Arch Park Foundation, Great Rivers Greenway, the City of St. Louis, By State Development, Jefferson National Parks Association, we're all working together every single day to create an amazing visitor experience. And there's many other partnerships that flow out of that, like partnerships with the Universal Design Group, which is a group of folks that represent the disability community in St. Louis, that advised us on every part of the City Arch River project. They're advising us on the old courthouse. We worked with St. Louis Artworks on the new murals designed by students that are on the construction fencing. That's one of my favorite parts of what we do is all of these wonderful partnerships that we have.
So let's talk about that visitor experience that you all are planning in the old courthouse. There's the more familiar cases, the Dred Scott and Virginia Minor. I assume they will also be a part of the renovations, but you're planning some new ways to share the story and some new stories maybe.
Yeah, so all those old important stories will be there, but as Pam mentioned in the intro, they're going to be seen in a much more human way. So not looking at just the court cases, but looking at the people, the individuals, and what made those such powerful stories. And then we are going to have new stories and a new focus for example, hundreds of people who sued for their freedom at the old courthouse. So there's going to be a lot more of that kind of history presented in the new exhibit galleries. And then the exhibit galleries themselves are going to be incredible new visual opportunities that were possible with the support of Gateway Arch Park Foundation. So we're really excited about having that new updated opportunity for the visitors to come and learn about this important history.
Yeah, if you think about the quality of the exhibits at the new Arch Museum, which if you haven't visited, you should definitely go see. But it's the same designer, and we're bringing the same technology into the old courthouse, which is just going to be a great experience for folks.
And something I remember you mentioned in the tour was, some things are just not meant to be housed in the old courthouse, like the archives. And tell us about that kind of challenge to find a new home.
Yeah, so that was such a huge undertaking. It's one of those things that you don't always think about. How do you move a huge, irreplaceable collection of museum objects and archival materials and curatorial materials from one historic building to another? So we're really fortunate again to have the support of our partners in helping find a lease space at the old post office. It took a long time and a lot of work for everybody involved to get the stuff out, but it was moved safely, it all went through well, and now it's all safely housed at the old post office until we find a permanent home. Yeah.
And again, speaks to, another partnership.
Exactly.
To help out, right?
Yeah.
So like we've been saying, there are all these projects to make St. Louis a more attractive place to visit and a safer place to visit, because there are our fair share of challenges with crime and homelessness. And, what is the importance, or what do you hope to get out of these renovations and improving the old courthouse?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you touched on a lot of the challenges that are facing downtown. Many of them are not unique to St. Louis. Urban areas, downtowns in across the country are facing some of these challenges. I would say that there are smart, passionate people working on a lot of those issues that you mentioned, and they're not mutually exclusive. We can work on those and also invest in really important buildings to the fabric of St. Louis and our country's history, like the old courthouse. And these renovations, like the renovations to the Arch, add to the vibrancy of St. Louis and downtown, which adds to safety and adds just to the pride and how people feel about their city.
Yeah, and I would add that making the building more accessible to people of all ability levels, that's another really important part of the project. So getting everyone to be able to experience the old courthouse, and then having the new exhibits where people from all backgrounds and all communities can see themselves and their stories reflected in the museum content. Really excited about that.
Well, and the old courthouse doesn't plan to open for another couple of years, but there are still plenty of opportunities for educational outreach that you all are doing in the community. So there are still plenty of ways to engage in those kind of activities. Any exciting upcoming events that we should know about?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have so much going all the time. I mean, if you go to archpark.org, there's lots of information about the events that the foundation hosts, and gatewayarch.com and the National Park website for the park always has lots of great information. But we've got amazing things coming up. Winterfest is going to open in Keener Plaza for its 8th year, which goes through the Saturday before Thanksgiving all the way to New Year's Eve. So there are just tons of things that we're working on together. You mentioned educational opportunities. The park has an amazing educational staff that brings in field trips every single day. The foundation has what we call the Journey Fund that ensures that under-resourced school groups and areas always have the opportunity to come to the Arch and experience this wonderful monument and museum. We strongly believe every kid in St. Louis has the right to come to the Arch,
Yeah,
and we want to make that possible.
We cannot wait to keep up with the progress and the updates. Thank you, Ryan McClure with the Gateway Arch Park Foundation, Jeremy Sweat with the National Park Service. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
My pleasure.